Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Throne Room. So, if you are new here, this is where we actually gather the matriarchs and we sit down and have important discussions about community issues and we actually work on actionable solutions. Okay, so you are fully aware of who is here today. But if you guys want, you can definitely go ahead and introduce yourselves again.
Okay, my name is Nikki. I have a business called Soul Things with 𝐼𝐞𝐚𝐭𝐿 and a podcast called How to Be Magical. Um, I am a multidisciplinarian practitioner of diasporic faiths. And yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. Angel, darling.
Yo, what's going on? Hello, y'all. My name is Angel. I am a member of the spiritual system Manuni. Um, I am a proud mother and artist. I am currently founding a nonprofit organization that is meant to be like social services for nation builders and homesteaders. That pretty much summarizes me in my daily mission.
I love it. I love it. So yes, today, I'm so glad you guys are here. Today we're going to be talking about, women stepping into their power, right? Because I think for the past few episodes, we have definitely heavily spoke about the patriarchy, right? The implications, how it's harmful to women, through relationships, how it's harmful to men through their, self-image and how they move through the world. So I think in this particular episode, I want to focus on the women and how we perpetuate some of these manipulative tactics, how we continue to allow the patriarchy to continue its indoctrination, and start thinking about how we can start taking accountability for the things that we allow to be okay, the things that we allow to normalize and contribute to perpetuate, you know and I think we should be looking to the future of how we can take some steps of transitioning the society from patriarchy to matriarchy. So one of the first things that I want to begin discussing is, what does it look like to step into your power? And anybody can, begin.
Um, oh, I'm sorry. Did we speak at the same time?
No, you can go ahead.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I thought I heard her start to speak. So I would say, right, that my favorite definition of power is the ability to influence the outcome of events, right? So I think the main way that we step into our power as women is taking a step back, looking at ourselves where we are right now in our reality, and looking at what we can do to influence the outcome of events. So, if, for example, a Black woman takes a step back and looks at the Black community in her city, and she says, you know what? We have too many young children getting sucked into gangs, right? She would then have to ask herself, what can I do to influence that? What impact can I have, right? And then I feel like, oh, my bad, I'm walking, y'all. So I feel like we can transfer that mentality to anything, our relationships, our businesses, our goals, our sisterhoods. What can I do as a woman to influence the outcome of these events?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with that is, um, before even getting to the point of seeing how you can influence a particular outcome, is not only seeing the issue that's in the community, but also seeing the issue within self. Like coming to that point of, well, like, because we have to be realistic. Not every person, not every woman feels like they have the power to do anything at all with anything that they see in the world, you know? So a lot of times what needs to happen first is the shadow work, right? To realize, am I even in control of my own experience? You know, the things that has happened to me in my life, what could I have done to sort of change or, you know, redirect the type of energy that I have been experiencing? So in general, we would have to get women to even feel like they have the power to make an influence, to even look at kids in the community and be like, well, I don't like the fact that they're in gangs. But a lot of people could just sit there and say that and then think that it's out of their control. You know what I mean? So you have to at least get to the point within yourself to be like, okay, well, I do have the power to do something about that, you know? So it takes steps. And I think the very, very first step is, you know, knowledge yourself, being able to figure out who you are, learn who you are. You know, you can utilize your charts, whatever, you know, understanding, having a good support system around you, family, friends, people who pour into you, to help you see who you are. Because a lot of times we don't see our own potential. You know what I mean? Sometimes it takes someone outside of us to be able to be like, well, you're really great at that. I can see your mind. You are, you know, intelligent, things like that, for you to be like, oh yeah, you know, because I think being that we've all grown in the patriarchy, we have also grown to look at ourselves as not valuable, to look at ourselves as, you know, like not powerful, you know, because our image of power is what we see as successful, somebody with money, somebody who can degrade someone else, someone who can manipulate someone else and be able to leverage something. In order for you to feel powerful, you have to have something to leverage, right? Again, so we have to redefine what power is. We have to redefine our self-value before we can be able to have an impact on an outside issue. Yeah.
No, I think you brought up a great point, Akasha, about letting like other people around you kind of like bounce ideas of self off of how you're being perceived in the community and your family and your friend group, and you know, of course your own shadow work. But I think that especially as women, we do well in communal spaces with each other. We do well in family units. It's not to say men don't, but it's just like we just naturally, I feel like from my experience growing up, I've always felt a lot of kinship with women, younger and older. So it's kind of like I'm always been open to the idea of criticism and things like that, and even like gentle encouragement, like you said, oh, you know, you're really good at that, and being like, oh, okay, I never thought about myself that way, so let me try and do something. And I feel like as we, you know, it goes, in order to be a good community member, you have to be a good friend to yourself first. You have to be a good partner to yourself first. Like you have to like really nurture yourself, so that way you're able to give those things to other people, so that way you can recognize in other people, like, you know, hey, you know, sometimes people just need a friend. They just need somebody to listen to them. They just need someone to like be a shoulder. They just need someone to just like sit with them while they just you know, going through it and without any judgment. But I think sometimes if we're very critical and judgmental of ourselves, and if you grow up within this structure, you can be very critical of yourself, about the way you look, about your abilities and all that stuff. I feel like that's where you start to see like a lot of negative traits come out of like competitiveness and cattiness and things that just make people feel like I have to act like this, but otherwise I'm not going to get the things that I need. I'm not going to have my needs met if I'm not like fighting tooth and nail. But if you step back and look at it from, well, there's enough for everyone here, and everybody doesn't always need the same things all the time, so there's no need for me to fight with the woman next to me for anything. Like what she needs and what I need might be two different things, and that's okay. And I think that also like sharing our struggles and being vulnerable with each other is important in helping to build up the community, because sometimes a lot of us carry our struggles really well and people don't think that we have problems at all, and they're just like, your life is so whatever. You're like, you don't know what the hell I'll be going through. I'm going through it. You don't know, you know? And I think as we share those stories with each other, we empower other women to be like, oh, I had no idea that she was going through that. You know, I went through something similar, and then we could like grow with, you know, we can grow with that. I think that it is, like I said, it is hard for a lot of women to be vulnerable and to admit that they do have limitations about things, because in this system, if you admit that you have vulnerabilities, that means you're weak, and if you're weak, that means that you're easily preyed on. And it's like a little it compounds. But I honestly think that some of the strongest people are some of the most vulnerable and tender and sensitive souls out there, like people that truly have been through hell and they still show up hopeful, optimistic. They might be a little guarded at first, but they're not like totally giving up on the concept of community and love, all those things that we all need.
Right.
I just wanted to add real quick. I think, well, I just wanted to clarify that I don't think that the first step into owning your power is acting upon, like taking on to yourself. Let me go out and save the youth of America. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, I feel like if you're not ready to observe the impact that you have on yourself and others, then I don't think that you're ready to step into your power. I think that you're still in the space of just discovery, learning, listening, researching, meditating. But once I say I'm ready to step into my power, I feel like that's a woman who is ready to start taking accountability for what ability she has and how they impact herself and the people around her.
Yeah, I agree. That's pretty much how I think about it. It is definitely taking accountability. I think that the biggest thing is once you get to a point where you decide that when you're unhappy with your life and you're just like, you know what, I'm changing it. I think once you step out of that victim mentality is the turning point. That means that you're actually stepping into your power at that particular point. When you're
Right.
just okay, nah, I'm tired. I'm fed up. I definitely am not liking how my life is going. My job is not working this way. My friendships are not working this way. My relationships are not working this way. And you're just like, you know what? I'm tired. I'm going to do something about this. Once you get to that point where it's like, you know what? I'm going to change, rather than sitting back and expecting other people to change their actions to better meet you. It's more so I'm going to do something to change my circumstances.
I agree. I agree.
I also agree. I think that sometimes a lot of people get stuck in that feeling of like they know that something is not right in their life, and they just like paralyzed with indecision, or they're like, well, I've been doing this thing for so long, I can't change it now. Like they get stuck to this concept of like, I invested all this time, whether it's in a relationship or friendships or a job or anything, and they feel like, oh, it's too late for me. I'm too old. I'm too whatever. And you're like, it's never too late to change your mind about anything. You can always course correct and go towards the life that you want. But the first step is recognizing that discomfort and being like, I don't like this at all. And I think, like you said, Angel, that sometimes that season is meditation and just be laying low and just like observing things. And you have to figure out what it is that you like and don't like. Sometimes it can take people a while. Especially when you're conditioned to like certain things. You have to examine, why do I even want this job if it's making me miserable and then my hair's falling out? Why am I even with friends with these people? I don't like them. I don't even think they like me. Why am I in this relationship? This man's getting on my nerves. This person's getting on my nerves, and I'm unhappy. People have to examine their attachments, and that's a big part of like identity and knowledge of self, is recognizing the things that you're attaching yourselves to and why. Sometimes that is really hard for people. Some people really have like a heavy cognitive dissonance with that. Like, okay, so you say that you don't like this. Why do you keep doing this thing that you say you don't like? They have to come to terms with that. And even if the person outside, has answers, sometimes people are not ready to hear certain things until they're ready to really acknowledge, like, okay, the part that, when we talk about accountability, the part that you played in it. It's like no one forced you to take this job. No one forced you to be friends with these people. No one forced you into that relationship. There was some part of you that wanted to be there. And now that you don't want to be there, it's okay to say you don't want to be there anymore. The world's not going to fall apart if you quit your job. The world's not going to fall apart if you're not friends with those people anymore. Like it's okay to change your mind. I think people have to give themselves permission to change and grow, and not feel like this, like every decision that they make in life is the end all be all, because it's not.
Right. Okay, I'm back. Allergies. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So the next thing that I want to discuss with you is, what are some of those outdated beliefs that we have internalized that we use to continue to perpetuate, these limiting beliefs? Because that's pretty much how I see it. I see it as limiting beliefs that keep you from being in your power. Uh, I feel like in general it's a full plan so that we aren't sovereign and self-sustainable people. So I think the indoctrination begins from infancy, and I think it's passed down through generational, what they call it, eugenics. So I think it's passed down through that, all the trauma. I think trauma itself is one of the things that keep people uh, having limiting beliefs about themselves. Feeling like they can't do, or they're unworthy. Um, so I want to discuss what are some other things that kind of keep us in our limiting belief system.
I think when you had mentioned trauma, like the first thing that came to mind was like how a lot of us are raised to be, not to be so loud and bold and, you know, outspoken, and how it's like, it's not ladylike to be like that, like it's not proper, you shouldn't brag on yourself and your accomplishments. You should be more humble about things. But it's like, again, when do you get to express pride in yourself? When do you get to express pride in your accomplishments and in your abilities? We hear it a lot in, mainstream culture of just being like, we don't care about your degrees. And it's like, okay, okay. Anybody that took the time, no matter what's going on in their life, to go back to school, to get certified in something, to educate themselves, like that is an accomplishment, and we should be proud of that. There's nothing there that doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't. It doesn't make sense to me. And being like someone who's witnessed my mom go back to school multiple times in the course of her lifetime and mine, she's changed careers like at least 4 or 5 times. And she's always willing to go back to school and learn something new. And that's something I've always taken, and be like, if you don't like how things are going, go back to school. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit hard. Yeah, you might have to make some sacrifices, and you might have to take out a loan. But she's always like, take out the loan. Don't worry about that. Like, your education, nobody can take that from you. So that was always something that stuck with me. And then when I think about like the women who came before us, who didn't have the same opportunities that we did, and how it's like you kind of doing yourself a disservice by not taking advantage of the world and the life and opportunities that they didn't get to have. Like, every generation is supposed to be better than the last. So sometimes the women in the previous generation, they didn't even know certain things were possible. So if they're not encouraging you all the way, it maybe not even be from a place of malicious intent. It might be just from a lack of knowledge. Like, they might not even know that was possible. Like, I didn't know that job existed. I didn't even know that trajectory existed. I didn't even know, I didn't even think about a possibility of living life like that. But I want you to have it. If that's what you want, I want to support you. And on the flip side, someone of, some of the older generation, the women, they may feel bitterness because they didn't get to experience those things. So now they're upset that you are, so it's like it comes, you have to just be able to sometimes look at people outside of the traumatic experiences that they've lived through, or like the circumstances of their time, and look at them objectively, and like I said, I think that the trauma sometimes of being proud of yourself, that stems all the way back to slavery. If a white person or a slave master or whatever complimented your child, you might want to like tamp it down a little bit. Like, oh no, they're not that smart. They're not that this, because you didn't want them to sell them off. You didn't want them to look at them as breeding stock. You wanted to kind of like shield them from what was, being too valuable in that structure. So you didn't want to highlight how good your children were and how smart they were and how enterprising they were, because that was going to be used to someone else's benefit. And I feel like our community has a lot of holdovers from chattel slavery that we may not, again, like you said, eugenics, epigenetics, we may not even recognize that that's what it is. But that's a lot of what it is. Because I've definitely heard that growing up from other people, like, oh, you shouldn't brag on your children too much, it's bad luck. And it's like, well, your children should know that you're proud of them. And if you're proud of them, there should be no harm in saying that you're proud of your children. You know, like, we have to break ourselves out of that. We are allowed to be proud of ourselves, of our children, of our community, of our accomplishments. Like, there is no harm in that, except if you're looking at it from a standpoint of a patriarchal, capitalistic society. Then, you know, there are pitfalls. But at the same time, it's like, if we're trying to break out of that, we can't keep operating under that same mentality.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that you said. Specifically about the things that we've been accustomed to holding ourselves back from, or denying our full capacity, especially as women, right? Because I feel like as within the Black community, real quick, I do apologize for my background, y'all. I'm on the train. I'm just trying to speak directly into the mic, but the Black community as a whole has, like you said, been trained to lessen our capacity or dumb down our skills. But then as Black women, there's an extra layer of, well, because I'm a woman, I can't do the same thing even a Black man can, let alone a white man, right? Um, and I think, like, being a nation builder, I've encountered a lot of women, for example, who have this mentality where they want to build culture, they want to build a community, they want to start a revolution, or they want to see revolution take place. But they feel like, because I'm a woman, I cannot spearhead that. I cannot get up and initiate a movement that changes the lives of our people across the globe. I am supposed to play second fiddle and be the helpmate to a man. So you would not believe how many times I have tried to work and build with women who hold themselves back because they feel like building is something that is a man's job, right? And I think that that is extremely detrimental, to us as women. There are a lot of instances where our power is taken away from us, but there are also a lot of instances where we give our power away because we don't want to be responsible for the building of the things that we want to reap the benefits of. Now, a lot of that could have been conditioning, but there comes a certain point where I feel like we have to take accountability for continuing to uphold conditioning when we have access to knowledge that shows us there's another way, right? At one point, we couldn't read. We couldn't go back and dig and research and find the true history of how women were warriors, of how women were leaders, of how women were ambitious, right? But in 2025, ignorance is not an excuse. There's too much information, there's too much technology, there's too many resources for you to keep using your femininity as an excuse not to be uh, driven towards the things that you want to see happen. And that's my perspective.
Yeah, I feel like it's the reason why people have that belief is because it's ingrained in our identities in general, right? So the reason why women feel like, oh, building's a masculine thing, like even right now, like first of all, we get it when we're growing up from our mothers of how to be ladylike. This is how you, walk. This is how you talk. This is how you operate in spaces where there are men. You know, if there's a lot of men around, you should be seen and not heard. Like, you know what I mean? Like, these are things that we grow up learning. And then not only that, it is reinforced, as adults. Whereas, you know, right now there's a lot of femininity coaches who are continuing, where women are continuing to take classes to learn how to be feminine because we're being told every day that we're just not feminine enough. Right? So there is the box of femininity being just these few things. And if you don't fit these few things, then you're not feminine, right? So in general, that because it's such a limiting concept of what femininity is, that negates a lot of the potentiality of what we can do, all of our capabilities, all of the things that we can do, we are limiting ourselves to almost everything. You know what I mean? Because of that. And it's a continuous indoctrination from childhood, from our genes, all the way up into adulthood, where we continue to pay money to learn and continue to be indoctrinated because we don't know anything else. Like, you know, it takes some of us who know better to come out and say, no, this is not what femininity is. Femininity is complex. You are supposed to be able to do anything you want. You are supposed to be able to express these different emotions. You are supposed to be able to build and exude this type of strength and be able to speak in this way and still be respected, right? So it's really a societal change that has to happen. You know what I mean? So yeah, everything that we learn, from the way that we wear our hair, from the way that we dress, from the way that we speak, you know, everything is judging you on how to be a woman. So it's no wonder why we sit here and be like, well, I can't do that. Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. Ooh.
Very true. Very true.
This stop is Newburgh.
This stop. That's funny. So the next thing, right, that I wanted to talk about is, well, before I get to the next question, I did want to speak about how in school, when we're growing up, I think one thing that happens is the nerds are picked on. Girls, boys, like, you know what I mean? I think that's one thing that we have to really make sure that when we're having kids now, we instill in them different values that we had. Like, you know what I mean? Different values, like, okay, yes, definitely learn. Definitely learn, but also definitely give them different ideas of what success looks like. Because I think our idea of success is how well can you be a cog in a machine? How well can you work for a company where you are not the person that's in charge? You know, and I think that's why when we do go into entrepreneurship trying to empower ourselves, we end up not even knowing what we're walking into, getting burned out, and ultimately failing, because this system has made it to where it doesn't empower you to be self-sustaining, right? The system is made for everyone to be a part of this particular matrix. And if you try to go outside of it, it's meant for you to fail, right? So that's why we have to create our own communities, and we have to create our own tribes and things and sisterhoods and covenants and things of that nature, so that we can empower each other and actually be self-sustaining, where we can be able to teach each other these different ideologies where we are empowered from birth, you know? Because I think one thing that I notice is the difference between Caucasian children and how they're raised versus Black children and how they're raised. And they are raised to the point where they can be wild. You know what I mean? They can be wild. They can run around. They can say whatever. While we may sit here and be like, wow, I would never say that to my mama. They have been raised as autonomous beings from birth. Like, you know what I mean? With the ability to express different emotions, with the ability to say whatever is on their mind and how they feel. And they're not as tamed, you know, as far as when it comes to behavior or misbehaving, because honestly, everything is set up for them to be adults anyway. Like, you know what I mean? Their parents already thought about what business they're going to take over once they grow. So they don't have to worry about making them, you know, a certain way for society, because they already know they're going to be the leaders of society. You know, I think white parents look at their kids like, okay, this is going to be the next CEO. This is going to be the next, you know? And I think when we look at our children, what we think is, well, I hope they make it, because, you know, the rest of us, we may not have done it. You know, I think a lot of people, when a Black person makes it to like stardom or fame or whatever, it's kind of like, oh, help me. You know, so I think Black people as a whole, we got to work on our ideas of success in this world. I know it's difficult, but we definitely have to change our idea of success. We have to start looking at what will get us to a point where we can be in commune with the earth and look at that as success. Not so much about how much you're able to consume, or, you know, whether you have jets or whether your name is this high. Like, no longer should we look at status and material objects as markers of success, but more so your peace of mind, your family. Like, that to me spells success in life, when you're able to have slow mornings, when you're not stressed all the time, you know, when people are not afraid of you, when people are excited to see you and they feel inspired by your presence. That to me is more about success. So I think if we instill this into our children, you know, moving forward, this is the new earth that we're creating, which segues us into the next question about what does a modern matriarchy look like, and how would it operate differently from our current system? So I kind of dived into that a little bit. So yeah, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts? What are some things that you wish would be, like, what's the thing that you would implement that would be different for the new earth, that's different from what we have now currently going on?
Okay, so one thing that you had brought up earlier, someone brought it up earlier, about certain things happening from birth. Something that I have been thinking about a lot, especially like in the last couple of years of like my spiritual and religious journey, in my practices, is the house that I'm a part of. It's very family based, right? So it's a lot of it's the straight couples and gay couples. So that's one thing that's very open. You know, there's gay married couples and straight married couples, but there's a lot of families. Like, there's a lot of people that have their kids, stepchildren, you know, extended families, their mom, you know, it's like, it's very family oriented. And one thing that I always love is when there are new initiates and they're like literal babies, or like little children, you know, like small school age children, and they're all white, and their little beads and their little head wraps and their little hats and things like that. And it just makes me think like, wow, this is beautiful. Like, you know, your parents care enough about your spiritual development and your safety, that they have, you know, went through the process of getting you initiated before you were even really old enough to make like any crazy decisions that's going to affect your life. You know, like, so you going out into the world fully covered and prepared and, like, you know, thought of, you know, considered in that way. And having that type of covering and prayer and protection over your life opens up a lot of doors for you. You know, it does a lot of things for your self-confidence, your self-esteem. One of my god sisters, she got initiated when she was in high school, and I asked her, I said, you know, you were 15, like, how did you feel? She was like, well, I was getting in fights a lot. I was really running the street, acting crazy, you know. So my mom was like, you need to chill, you know. So she was like, you know, she saved my life. Like, she calmed me down a lot. I had to sit down with her for a whole year and just like be still and like really think about what it was that I wanted for my life, and, you know, how I wanted to move in this world and what kind of adult I wanted to be. And I said, well, how did you feel about at school? Did the kids treat you any differently? She's like, you know, I got a couple of questions here and there, but I knew that what I was doing was for my betterment, and I didn't really care about what anybody else thought about it. And she said, for the most part, a lot of people were accepting, even if they didn't understand. They were very accepting, and you know, I was surprised by the way that people were very accepting. And now she's like 24. She's like one of the most like smart, intelligent, down to earth, sweet people that I know. She's very, very, you know, knowledgeable about the religion, and, you know, she's very well respected in our community. And I just think like, wow, that's because your mom made that investment, you know, in you. And not to say you wouldn't have turned out to be that person at all. I'm not saying that. Like, you obviously were going to be this person, but you have some fortification, you have some grounding, you know, you have some foundation that other people might not have, you know. So when we think about what that looks like, I think it looks like, you know, matriarchal things, because her mom was the one who brought her husband and the children and everything to the religion. So it's like, I think about, you know, centering the children in that way, their education, their spiritual development, their growth, their care. Something that I would implement rites of passage programs for boys and girls, because I did a rites of passage program when I was 13, as a part of another like after school program I was in. But one of the teachers, God bless Miss K, I don't know where she's at these days, but she was like our first, you know, like kind of like earthy archetype of, like, you know, the head wrap, crystal, copper jewelry wearing, patchouli and frankincense smelling, older woman who was very much like, I want y'all to think about what kind of young ladies you want to be, and we had I think it was almost like a 2-month program in the spring of maybe like 6th or 7th grade. And she was very much like talking with us about, okay, you're going to be 13. You guys are 12 going on 13. Before you become teenagers, think about the kind of world that you want to live in and think about how you want to show up in that world. And I think that that's very important, for boys and girls. Zora Hurston wrote a book, 𝐅𝐞𝐚𝐭𝐿, where she interviewed one of the last people that was brought over on a documented slave ship, and his name is Kasala Lewis, and he talked about how right before he got taken away, that some of the men in the community noticed him looking at women, like looking at girls his age, and they noticed that he was looking at them in a way that was like sexual, and they were like, okay, it's time to pull you to the side and explain to you what it is to be a man in our tribe, in our culture. And he says that was his biggest regret, was that he got snatched from his community before he had a chance to go through his rites of passage. And for a long time, he didn't feel like he was a man because he didn't have that. He had to, navigate manhood and what that meant on his own in a strange place without any of his family, or, just in hostile conditions. So I really think that rites of passage programs are very important for young people. They give the older people a chance to, sit and talk with the younger people about what is it that they're, confused about, what is it that they're looking forward to, what is it that they're unsure about, and we can impart our wisdom on them in like a controlled environment and help them to navigate some of these uncomfortable feelings of puberty and, being a grown up, and, some of the fears and things that we all have had as teenagers, preteens. And I think that that's something that's missing right now, especially now. We don't have a lot of media geared towards young people. Like, they're watching the same things that grown-ups are watching, which is very problematic. Some stuff is not for kids. And I think that that's okay, that like kids have age-appropriate things that go with their development and their psyche. Like, they should not be watching the same stuff that a grown person is watching. Like, internalizing those images, internalizing those messages, thinking they need to show up in the world like a 25-year-old woman, like you're 13. Like, there's no reason for you to feel like you got to be looking like you're 25. Like, enjoy being 13. But we used to have a lot more media that was centered on that. We used to have our own shows, all that, Nickelodeon and Disney. We used to have movies. Like, we used to have a lot of magazines, like teen magazines. I'm like, do they even got the teen magazines no more? Like, where's the Teen Beat and the Right On? Like, where is that stuff? Because those kids need that stuff. Our kids especially need to see themselves reflected in things that are positive and uplifted and age appropriate. And that's something that I would implement.
I love that. That's something that I speak about all the time. I feel like because our like country is like a melting pot of sorts, I feel like it's very easy to kind of lose that unity type situation where it's not even about the community and everything is about the individual striving to get ahead. Like, you know what I'm saying? I feel like in other countries where there is a central spiritual system, the spiritual system is embedded in the Constitution because the culture and everything is all about morality and principles. And then all of those rites of passage is a part of the culture of the society, right? And I feel like over here is just a melting pot. It's just a corporation where everybody can come and, do what you got to do. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but there are certain communities, like if you notice, like the Jewish kids got to go to Hebrew school, okay?
Exactly.
Right? Before they do their bar mitzvah and their bat mitzvah. The Asian kids as well, their parents are sending them to school to learn their languages, whether that's Mandarin, Cantonese, whatever. Like, like every community still has their like certain like little pockets of like, okay, no, this is what, even like preserving your language, like
right,
own languages at home, like that's all very important to be like, no, this is our stuff, and other people might not do this, but this is what we do over here. And like
right
around the world, you need to know that you came from somewhere, and this is what we do, and you need to walk with that, And I think, like you said, because America is a melting pot, it makes people feel like they need to just forego their whole identity, all of their culture, all of their religious beliefs, all of their traditional stuff to be a part of America. And I realized, I think a lot of people, a lot of people's parents finally realize after a while, like, damn, I really messed up. Like, I didn't teach my kids our language. I didn't teach them anything about our culture. I never took them back to our country. I never did, I didn't want to cook the food because they were scared. They didn't want to take the traditional food to school because the other kids were making fun of them. And it's just like,
right.
There are some people, I love being on TikTok and seeing people fix their kids, their lunches or whatever. And one girl, she's in the South and she's like, yeah, my daughter is like a little old lady. Like, she be wanting some old lady black Southern food for lunch. And I'm like, I cannot send you to school with a pickled pig's foot, but if that's what you want, I'm not gonna stop you. Like, she's like, that's what she wants. And she, and it's just like, we don't even think about food being culture in that way.
Yes, absolutely.
People, especially as Black Americans, they'll just say that, oh, it's just Southern food. It's like, no,
it's our food.
It's our food. Like, we was the ones that were cooking it. We were the ones that created it. And I think that is an American thing, to just like absorb the best parts of other people's culture and then turn around and be like, no, it's ours. And it's like, and then not teach about it at all. Never say anything about where it came from. Never teach anything about the people's origins. Just, totally gloss over like very important parts of history. So like teaching history and culture and identity at home is very, very, very important. And
absolutely,
for the most part, we learn who we are from our mothers. We learn about our culture through our mothers. She's the one that is for the most part, takes care of us and shows us how to engage in this world. So yeah, if we had more women with support to be able to be like, I want to be with my children. I don't want to have to be forced to go back to work. I want to be able to stay home with my kids as long as I want. That is something that would, breed a different generation of children, to be like, no, I have identity. I came from somewhere, and not just because, I read about it in a book. Like, no, this is what we do at home. And it's okay if it's different than what you do. Like, what you do and what we do doesn't have to be the same at all. But I have to remember, I have to retain who I am. And that is very important. When people know who they are, it is harder to break them because they have a knowledge of self. And that knowledge of self, when you walk into places where you may be the only person who looks like you, is what is going to keep you from losing your damn mind. It really is. It really is. Because you could tell when you meet some of us, you'd be like, you ain't had no Black people around you at all.
I mean, everybody may not have their mom, but I do think that sometimes, let's say, you grew up in a house where you were indoctrinated in the American dream, right? Do this, do that, do this, do that. I think the best way to find out your culture, if you can, go to the elders in your family, start spending time with them, start asking them questions. What it takes is, I think that's the accountability part of, okay, well, maybe I didn't get this, but what are you going to do about it now? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, what are you going to do about it now? Because I do not feel like Black people do not have a culture. A lot of people say that, but we have a culture that is unique to us. And I feel like there has to be some sort of respect there. And the only respect that's going to come is if we respected ourselves as the people who come from a specific space, So you definitely need to go through your family, and you need to be asking questions, spending time with your elders. Stop focusing so much on just your own personal advancement or climbing a ladder, but just focusing on becoming rooted, becoming grounded in who you are, and then moving forward from that place of knowing yourself, like you said. So absolutely, yes. Rites of passage, being grounded in your culture and identity. It's a big thing. Yes, absolutely. Angel, did you have some thoughts
about what would be different in the matriarchal society moving forward from how things are
like, what's
currently?
something you would implement that we don't implement now, as far as the society that we live in currently?
Ooh, there is a few things. I think the main thing that comes to mind is sustainable energy being the global norm. Because I think that, of course, there are instances of electronic cars. There are instances of using solar power or hydropower to, utilize our technology. But I don't think that that's the global norm. So, or even in America. the entirety of America, that is not the general consensus. And I think I would like it to be that way, especially because, I spent a lot of time researching how ancient societies were able to build certain structures or put together technologies that may not be exactly the same as our own, but fulfill very similar needs. And from what I've been able to see, they were able to utilize energy to do some of the things that we do, if not better.
Mm,
They have monuments that to this day we can't figure out how to recreate with all the technology that we have, and they didn't have heavy fossil fuels supposedly, right? Um, so I don't know. I would like to see us collectively put more effort into not being lazy, because I feel like a lot of times that's what it is. Hey, we figured out how to get this shit done. If it has a large carbon footprint and fucks up our water system, oh well, because trying to figure out something more efficient is gonna take a lot of time, energy, and okay, well, let's do it then. Let's buckle down and do it. And it should be easier to do it for those of us who are starting fresh with smaller tribes and communities. It should be easy for us to figure out how to power our small little communities off of natural resources that can be regenerated, like the wind, you know?
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
so that's something I would like to see. And then lastly, I would like to see us be able to share those resources with respect for each other. I know like me and Akasha and a group of allies, right? Earlier today, we were just having a conversation about um, how to work with each other, right? And I think one thing that patriarchy did was normalize the sort of us versus them conquer mentality. If you're not us, then you're an enemy, or just even if you're not an enemy, just by you being different than us, you are a threat and you need to go down, right?
Mhm, mhm.
I would like to see us get back to the space where we're able to respect each other's differences, to learn from each other's differences, um, and to honor each other enough to share this fucking planet together without going to war. That would be my next thing.
Mhm. Yeah, it's crazy you said that because that's one of the biggest things that I've been speaking about since I started even being on social media and trying to talk to the world because I was fed up with the world. Like, so
Yeah.
one of the biggest things I spoke about was, you know, going back to an economic system that honors each person and their value and what they bring to the planet, right? Because we're all stewards of the planet, right? Everyone has a skill, everyone has something that they bring, everyone has a purpose, right? And that's one of the things that I want to make sure I implement or return to us, because again, this is something that we had before, right? Before we were all colonized. I want to make sure that we return to a space where we can see the value in each other. I think we can get rid of the well, what do you bring to the table conversation. I think we can get rid of the well, you're not a mother, so you can't tell me how to mother my child. Like we can get rid of all of those mentalities where we feel like we are higher than somebody else and not be open enough to hearing them out or valuing their insight. So I feel like we can start with the economy, getting back to that barter and trade system that, as long as you are giving, you are also receiving, because we're not doing it in a transactional way, but more so being able to just give, knowing that the universe will return to you, because that's just how the universe works. Right. So that's one thing that I want to make sure we implement and sort of slowly phase out the dollar system, because that the obtaining of a tool just so that we can live sustainably and be able to have resources just to live, have shelter, feed, clothe ourselves, and get food, all of that, that has distracted us from being able to find our purpose on this planet. For us being able to realize the purpose of our experience, even being here. I feel like that has distracted everybody trying to get the tool to get the freedom that we really want. And we have forgotten that we want to just experience life. We have forgotten that all we really want to do is just lay in the sun and have our feet in the sand. That's what everybody wants. Everyone wants peace of mind. Everyone wants to be happy, right? But we have, forgotten about this, and we have focused our efforts on getting money. So that's one of the things I want to make sure that we get rid of, is changing our focus from the money or the tool to the liberation or the freedom or the peace of mind. The ability to be present, the ability to see value in one another and ourselves, and be able to trust and go back to a communal society where we can just be like, okay, sure, go around, help the next person, and you don't think about, well, what they're going to give you back, because it's not about that. So most definitely, that's something that I really feel strongly about, getting us coming back to nature, not littering, keeping the oceans clean, all the other things. All the other things, I looked into eco housing, right? And being able to refrigerate stuff in the ground, being able to utilize clay pots to keep your food fresh, being able to create food forests, all these things I looked into, of creating a system of us just getting back to our natural state, to be honest. So it's a lot. I don't want to ramble. Yeah, man. He said, yes, chasing money has become a distraction. And I'm so glad the Chinese is exposing how they are ripping everyone off based on selling bags, based on brand and status. Again, yes, definitely glad about that. Definitely glad about that. Ooh, excuse me. Yeah, so, let me see. Okay, so the last part, right, is the practical section. So we definitely went over, accountability, self-awareness, healing and deconditioning, envisioning the matriarchy, and what are the things that we want to implement in the new earth. So now we're on to the practical and strategy phase of this part. So the next question is, what are actionable steps we as matriarchal women can take right now to reclaim power in our lives and usher in this shift? So, actionable steps. I think for me, the thing that you mentioned, Nikki, in one of our last episodes, you definitely mentioned creating sisterhood communities. That is the one thing I'm focusing on right now as an actionable step, of getting people who are all aligned on the same frequency together, to where we can actually start strategizing, we can actually start implementing these things, and actually creating that space where there is a safe space for you to be, and actually start implementing these rites of passage. Like you said, I think it starts with rebuilding the community, creating that space. Because I think the thing that holds us back is maybe not having that support system, maybe going through life and you may not be a part of a spiritual family. Your family may not be close. Like, you know what I mean? Your relatives or whatever. So sometimes I think it takes us intentionally creating those spaces where we can come together and start making these changes, and it starts with the mind, starting with your own ideology, learning who you are, getting grounded in your own identity and culture, and then moving from there. Like, okay, well, these are the things that I love. These are the things that I'm going to teach in the next generation, because I think that's the next step as well. Making sure that when you do have children, this is how you're going to raise them. Being intentional about, okay, what did I love about my upbringing that I'm going to keep, and what I didn't love about my upbringing, and throwing that away. So I think the biggest thing is being intentional, intentionally creating spaces, intentionally breaking generational curses, intentionally learning self. So, yes.
I think that's great. Like you said, it's just, like I said, being a good community member and having the desire to be a good community member and hold yourself to a certain standard of accountability and ethics, kindness. Those are things that we could all keep in the forefront of our mind. Because I think sometimes people get so like dogmatic about their beliefs and the way they feel about things. And it's like, well, if you don't believe the exact thing that I believe the exact same way, I can't be in community with you. And it's like, that's not, listen, you got to have a little bit of room, there got to be a little wiggle room for differences. I mean, provided no one is hurting anyone or themselves, I think that we can have a lot of, different types of community members, and we need that. Personally, the way that I am doing my actionable things, like I'm very focused on media. So I've worked in media for the last 10 years, and sometimes being the only person that looked like me there, or one of the very few, and I've learned a lot. I've absorbed every single thing that I've, every job that I've worked on, and I've learned a lot. And I've also, like I said, have been very introspective and retrospective about like, well, what's the media that I grew up on? How did it help me? And how was it influential? And the void that we have right now, like this hole that we have that could be filled with positive things. So what are some positive things I want to fill it with? And recently someone who, a friend of mine who's, she's due any day now, she's having a baby. She was like, I want, you should start doing children's books. I said, girl, I don't know nothing about no children's books. She was like, no, but there's like certain things that, that certain concepts I think that would be really good if you, broke them down for children. And I was like, okay, I'll think about it, but I don't know anything about children's books. And she was like, I don't care, like figure it out. So now I'm like, all right, I'll figure it out. We'll figure out some children's books. She's like, I want them for my kids, and I know I'm not gonna find it at Barnes and Noble. I know I'm not gonna find it on Amazon. Like, you gotta write the books. And I'm like, okay, I'll write some stuff. I don't know where to start, but I'll figure it out.
I'm glad you said that, because I even had a thought about children's books, but because I write as well, but it's just like, I also want to write for children, but it's almost like I don't know. It's like I have to do the research to understand how to write for what grade and what words to use and how to present it. And just it's a entire industry to really learn how to do the thing. And even me trying to find children's books for spirituality, like I ordered this book called Mami Wata on Amazon, and I was just disappointed by the book when I got it. Like, this can't be for kids. This is not even written properly. But okay, whatever.
Okay.
That means someone needs to definitely step up and do it to where it makes sense. Because I can tell you this: when it comes to other movements, people are making children's books for, daddy's pregnant, just different things. Like they're making books, so if other people can do it, we can do it. I think it's important that, like you said, children definitely have to learn who they are. They have to learn and understand their spirituality at a young age, make them whole from the beginning, give them some sort of solid foundation.
Oh, absolutely. And I remember, I don't know, I've always loved to read. So I've been an avid reader my whole life. And there were certain books that I remember very fondly that, centered around us. And there was used to be this series of fairy tales that was redone, like it was books, and it was redone like African style, right? So it was Rapunzel, and she had like long braids, and it was like and we had like different names, and it was this very unique style. And I remember finding the books again on Amazon, and I was like, oh my God, I remember seeing these books on 125th Street when I was a kid. Like, and I would beg my mom, like, please let me just get one. And she would buy me one and two, over time. But like, I didn't have them all. I wanted them all because they were also all of the pictures looked like us. Everybody was black. Like it was like very, to the point where I still remember it, very vividly. And it's like, this was almost 30 something years ago. And I was just like, oh my God, like, this is so incredible. And then there was another set of children's books that I had that was science based. They were these little hardcover books, and there was this little mouse named Christopher, and he would ask questions like, why does it thunder? What's lightning? And what's electricity? And like, it made me like, he broke down these like very, hefty scientific things into like very small, like manageable things for children. So it's like, children are naturally curious about things. They naturally want to learn about the world around them. That's why they always asking you why, all these questions all the time. And some parents don't have all the answers, and they be like, girl, I don't know, sir, little boy, I don't know, what the heck, I don't know. And a lot of the times, like, we didn't grow up with Google, so like, somebody would be like, well, we gotta go to the library and figure that out.
Right, exactly.
I don't even know what that is. What's that word? So now, like you said, we can't use, I don't know, as an excuse. Like, we have so much technology at our fingertips. We have so much, so many things available to us to learn more about the world around us. And so it is, some of us are going to have to take on the responsibility of being like, well, I want to make things that are for children, for adolescents, for young people that's geared towards us, blah, blah, blah. So like, that is the mission. That is what I want to do. I really want to get into creating media that is focused on our spiritual and cultural development for all ages, whether that's documentaries, whether that's, scripted dramas, whether that's, movies, whether that's books. Like, I just love us like that. I feel like we have so many stories to tell, and so many different ethnic subcultures. Like, every Black person is not the same, and that is okay. Like, some of us are from totally different places around the world, and the diaspora, some of us regionally, we're different. We have like, everything about us is culture. And I think that sometimes, like you were saying earlier, when we are not the dominant group in this society that we live in. Well, in this country, we're not the dominant group. In other countries, we are. So sometimes, even just to remind ourselves of that, of like, this is what our experience is here. This Black people, other places, that they don't even realize that they Black, because everybody's Black. Like, Black is not, it's not enough. It's not doesn't mean anything truly. It's like, everybody, but they're like, I'm Igbo, I'm Yoruba, I speak Tree, I speak, Ghanaian, I'm Ghanaian. I'm like, people have like different distinctions, whereas here, a lot of times people sometimes forget that just because like Black people from New York and Black people from California is not the same kind of Black people.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. We don't there's nothing wrong with that, but if you don't know the history of the Great Migration and about, different nations and how dialect spreads and all of these things and different beliefs that people had, and if you don't know any of that, and you're just leaving it up to the dominant culture to teach you about you, they never gonna teach you everything. They can't. They don't know everything. They don't care to know everything. And if they teach you too much, you might not want to be invested in the dominant culture, and you might not want to take part in being a cog in the machine. You might want to go off and do your own thing, and they can't have that. So it's like, like, I love us down. I love being Black. I love Black people. I love Black children. I love, listening to kids have conversations amongst themselves. They're all so bright and so intelligent, and they're so inquisitive. And sometimes they make you think about life differently, because they'll just say something and you be like, oh, I didn't even think about that. Like, wow, you're very smart. Thank you, for making me think differently. And I think that is also something that we need to get to, that we need to get back to listening to the children. European society does not acknowledge their children. They don't respect their children. They don't respect their children, their elderly. Well, they don't respect nobody, really. But that was something that the Native Americans had said when the Europeans came here. They were like, they did not like the way they was talking to their children. They was like, we do not talk to our children like that. We don't beat our kids. We don't do none of that. Like, we believe that the children are the ancestors' return. So I was like, I'm not gonna beat grandma. Why am I beating my child? Like, why am I putting my hands on my child? Why am I belittling my child? Like, they did not like the way that the Europeans came in and was like telling them how to deal with their kids. It was like, I'm not talking to my kids like that. I'm not, dealing with my grandmother like that. So why am I going to talk to my little toddler like that? Like, like you said, they should be free to explore and question and contribute to discussions. Like, we deserve, we'll do better as a society if we listen to the children and cater to the children and what they need, because that's the future, as cheesy as it sounds. That is who we are. If you don't invest in that, if we don't invest in our children, we can't expect to have any culture. We can't expect to have any continuum in this plane. So the things that we are investing in should be, child focused, family focused. Even if you don't have kids, and you don't have, like you said, you don't have to have kids to contribute to the upbringing and the development of the children of the community. Like, they're all our responsibility.
Exactly. That's the biggest thing. Just the idea that all children need to be cared for, no matter whether it's your kid. Like, I think looking at kids as possessions is a big problem. Like, that's mine. Don't you touch my kid. Like, but yeah, most definitely. Looking at each person as an extension of each other, then you can walk down the street and be like, "Where your mama at? Come here. Stop running around by yourself." Like, just and you just naturally take on that responsibility, because that child is just as valuable and important as the child that you birthed out of your own womb. So I feel like we just gotta most definitely get back to that. So yeah, it's so much that we definitely have to like unlearn and relearn. But to me, I feel like it's a lot easier once we get rid of a lot of things that we internalized before. Once you take that moment, that dark night of the soul, to start listening to the inner voice,
Mm-hmm.
and stop thinking about how you're supposed to express in the world by what people are going to think and what people have said to you. Stop listening to all of that, all of the outside influence, but also listening to your inner influence, right? And then once you listen to that, you'll start to realize, like, oh, my intuition, my body is calling me to do a thing, because a lot of our morality and principles is embedded in our DNA. We know what to do. We don't really need someone to tell us what to do. We know what to do. We just don't listen to it. So yeah, absolutely. Angel. Oh, are you there? Oh, darling.
Yeah, I'm here.
I'm sorry. I know you traveling around, so.
Yeah, it's a lot going on. What was that last question?
Yeah, what actionable steps are you ready to take right now to usher in the shift?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. And you already know because I've been talking anybody's
Oh.
ear off that will listen. I am currently working on creating a nonprofit organization called the BRE Collective. I briefly said earlier, the goal is for it to be like social services for nation builders or homesteaders.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I feel like it ties in everything that I've spoken about here today, from learning how to utilize cleaner sources of energy to learning how to work together and pool resources to women coming together and taking deliberate and intentional action towards building the things that we say that we want. I personally feel that I cannot call myself a matriarchy, or a matriarch, and tell people to follow my lead if I don't have any solutions for them.
Mm-hmm.
If I can't, why not just follow themselves? If I can't show them something that's worth following, right?
Right.
So I want to put together this this site. It should be live by July 1st,
Okay, great.
and people will be able to come and register as either nation builders or homesteaders who are needing resources and materials to build, or carpenters, agriculturalists, early childhood development specialists, people who can donate their time in the form of pro bono work to help um, build these cultures. Um, yeah, it really gets extensive, and I'll be doing a webinar very soon to really break it down and explain our projections for the next 5 years. But that is the action that I'm taking right now. Um, yeah.
Lovely. Lovely. So yeah, so that means that you should be sharing the links so that we can share it with the people. And we can, definitely come to your webinar, learn about, you know, the structure of everything, how we can help, how we can offer our skills if we know anybody who's willing to offer their skills, and just contribute to the situation. Because I feel like us being able to have our own like center of social services and being able to get resources that's for us, that's for our sustainability, is very, very important. And I think just getting back to that, the importance of coming to each other for that, like respecting each other, to be like, okay, I'm going to come to you. You know, I think we have gotten used to going to the system and being dependent upon it. You know, I want to make sure that we actually respect each other enough to where we would go to each other and be able to offer our services and be able to get help as well. So remember to share the links and stuff with me so I can share it with everybody.
Yes, I definitely will. Um, we're looking at having our first webinar sometime next month. I'm still organizing the dates,
Mm-hmm.
but as soon as I have those links available, you will be literally the first person to get it. Um,
Good. I know I
quite
will.
literally.
'Cause
I'll probably be on the phone with you making the link. Like, yeah, bitch, I'm putting this link together right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm excited. I'm excited for everything. I'm excited, you know, for the media, because that's important. You know, I'm excited for the children's books. That's definitely important. And yeah, so Nikki, I'm probably gonna hit you up on the back end about that, because I definitely need help in that area, because I definitely had it. I definitely have it in my mission statement of doing children's books, but it's like, yeah, I don't know how to do that. So it's on my to-do list of trying to learn, and maybe we can kind of collaborate and learn the process together and kind of just tackle that thing, because you know children are important and we love them.
They are. And I do have a few friends who are illustrators. You know, I've been amassing a nice, you know, little network of creatives and people that I would draw on to help me to bring certain things to life. Especially when it comes to like illustrations and drawing graphics and things like that. Because again, like I don't think we need to be relying on AI too much. Like we gotta still like I'm sorry, like we gotta still,
Yeah.
you know, the illustrators and the artists, and they need to be paid. The creatives need to be paid, and we need to, you know, make sure that we are creating pathways for people to sustain off their art. And
Yeah.
if we're over relying on AI and things like that, we kind of like cutting like creativity and humans out of the picture, when we need to be working together to do that. So if it takes a little bit longer, or if it might cost a little bit more on the front end, we just gonna have to be okay with it. So that way, in the long run, everybody can benefit from their work and their labor, and their contributions. So
Yeah, that goes back to, you know, seeing the value in people, because I need everyone to remember, at the end of the day, all of this stuff could shut down. All of this could shut down, then all you're gonna have is just people staring at each other, because there's no internet, there's no money, there's no system in place that's gonna feed us.
right.
So what are we gonna do then? I think everything that we do has to be with the intention and understanding that we are independent of said system, where we can come to each other, we can see the value in each other, you know, creating those networks where it's like, oh yes, I love your art, let's do this together, let's do that, you know. So I tell people all the time, the internet ain't gonna be here forever. It wasn't always here. I lived through the time when it wasn't always here. I remember when the internet came, you know? So just as quickly as it came and got to it as advanced as it is now, that was quick.
Exactly. It could all shut down. Okay.
Yes.
We've experienced a lot of technological advancement in our lifetime, and that's a bit
Yes.
scary, you know.
And that's just one lifetime. So that should tell you that this thing is not, you know, like there's no proof that this is long, sustainable type situation where it's going to be here for eons and eons. No, I don't think so. So yeah, we need to be prepared. You know, we need to be prepared, and we need to not be afraid of the world if it were to change back. So we have to know how to navigate that kind of world. So yes, dealing with people, even my books, you know, I commission art for my books, you know, and people still ask me like, oh, do you have an ebook? I'm like, no, because I want to make sure there's a physical copy. So when the internet is not here, everybody still has the wisdom. Like, you know what I mean? Because physical books is going to last longer than the internet. You know what I mean? So I want to make sure people are going back to actually turning a physical page and reading, that could just be the millennial in me. But anyway, so yes, absolutely. One of the things I'm doing now again is teaching, but the biggest part of that is dealing with the psychology of our people, returning it back to what it needs to be, and helping people start an initiation, right? So that's the biggest thing that I'm doing with Yanism right now, is making sure that people know that there's a space where they can return to their original psychology and ideology of, nature-based spirituality and understanding and culture. And reintegrating that into their daily lives, right? And then forming a community around that. So that's definitely something I'm working on, right now, currently. So I'm excited. Excited. So yes, if you guys are interested in that, again, Yanism classes are every Friday. Okay, we tend to gather every Friday night on Bigo, and if you are on Eastern, it's 10:30 Central, 9:30 standard time, and we tend to sit and watch the classes together and actually sit and have a discussion. You can get to actual questions, and that is what we do. Again, every Saturday, this is when we gather all the matriarchs together and we have throne room. Okay, so as we tend to go on, make sure you guys are staying up to date, paying attention to the Instagram stories, and you are paying attention to all the announcements, because that's where I'll be sharing everyone's projects, what everyone is doing, and you can figure out where you can be a part, how you can help, and be a part of the movement, be a part of the collective. We're not just sitting here making content for y'all to just sit back and giggle. Okay, so but yeah, that's pretty much it for today. Do you guys have any closing thoughts before we go?
I think that we covered a lot in this discussion, and I'm looking forward to seeing all of the ways that we implement some of our individual projects that are for the betterment of the community. And I'm excited about, meeting other like-minded people who have a desire to build. And I do think that we all have individual power. And I think that sometimes we forget that. And it's our responsibility to remind each other of our own individual and collective power.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree.
Definitely enjoyed the build, guys. Can't wait to sit down with y'all again. And as always, thank you for having me.
Of course. Of course. Well, thanks for coming, especially when you're like moving around and, going places and you got things going on. So definitely thank you for taking the time out to come in and have this discussion with us. I appreciate it. I appreciate both of your energies so much.
Yeah, sorry, my background a little ghetto.
It's okay. It's okay. Yes. Thank you so much, guys, for coming. I appreciate your energy. Thanks, everyone, for watching in the comments. I see you all. I appreciate it. I can't wait to see you all next week. So, everyone, enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you have a good night. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all next week.
Bye. Thanks for having me again. Thank you.
Monet.